many years, I have been told blockchain, not Bitcoin. It's really premised on the idea of enterprise adoption of blockchains, distributed databases. Mildly interesting. Now, it's taken some time, but we are starting to see changes in the way that businesses operate given this new technology. And that's what we're going to discuss today. Welcome back to Crypto Clarified. This is the show where we talk about and think about a fast-moving and evolving digital asset space. My name is Benjamin Dean. I'm Director of Digital Asset Strategy at WisdomTree. Today, I'm joined by Arpit Sharma, who is COO at PWR Labs. We're going to have a great discussion. Before we begin, though, US listeners, check out wisdomtreeprime.com, Apple, Android app stores. Check it out. Hit subscribe and share on this podcast, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, whatever your purveyor of podcasts is. Hit subscribe and share. Makes life easier. You can always find me on the Bird app, X, at Benjamin Dean. I'm on it too much. Check it out. Before we begin, I do need to state the following to clarify the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of WisdomTree and PWR Labs and are subject to change. Anything we present in this podcast is not intended to be relied upon as a forecast, research, nor as investment or tax advice. The information and opinions expressed in this podcast are not a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any securities. Reliance upon them is at the sole discretion of listener. Please remember, past performance is no indication of future results. All right, now on to the fun stuff. Let's move to the interview. Arpit Sharma, welcome to Crypto Clarified.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thanks for having me here.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. To kick things off, how about you let the listeners know a little bit about your background and how you got involved in this very interesting digital asset cryptocurrency space?
Yeah, sure. So I got started way back in 2018, second half, when the layer 2 era was still starting. So I got started back then. So I was at EY at that point, and I was working with multiple clients on different engagements where blockchain implementations were involved, or at least we were pitching because we saw some value propositions in this technology at that time. And at that time, something interesting happened. I got introduced to this amazing guy, Sandeep, who is the co-founder of Matic Network. I got introduced to Sandeep through some common friends, and we started solving a pretty interesting problem for Matic at that time. So the idea or the problem that we took was, how do we drive adoption of Matic for enterprise clients? So that's the problem which got me started in blockchain. And at that particular instance, I have had already like 7-8 years of enterprise experience. So I was pretty confident about pitching this new technology to very seasoned senior leaders of big enterprises. So I had a good handle of what kind of value propositions they are looking for. So I got started like that. And then eventually I joined Polygon full time as the VP Global Enterprises. I was leading enterprise VD globally for them for a year. Did some pretty interesting projects. I was fortunate to be part of some like era defining projects like JP Morgan doing first on-chain trade in Project Guardian, Project Orchid, where which was Project Orchid, which was programmable money, which was done by MAS in Singapore FinTech Festival. So I was fortunate to be part of those projects. Then multi-year partnership with Flipkart, I was leading that in India, and a lot of pretty interesting projects in between. Then I moved on to Near Foundation as Managing Director for Southeast Asia and Middle East. Here I was driving BD across different segments. And currently I work with PWR Labs as their Chief Operating Officer. PWR Labs is a cutting edge layer 0 protocol, and we are building the next generation of blockchain.
Huh. That's an interesting background. We've had the CEO of Polygon on the podcast in the past. It's probably 18 months ago. And it's fascinating to watch that. The other one is, most people don't realize, but EY had I guess they would have called it a blockchain research group, but very sophisticated. I've met at least one of their applied cryptography, and it's really interesting to watch how that group of people have subsequently gone on to build so many interesting things.
How about you let the listeners know a little bit about what you're doing with Near Labs now? Well, Power Labs, I should say, but Near Foundation. And what is the what you'd almost say why Power Labs, why Near Foundation, so on and so forth. How about you just give the listeners some color around that?
Yeah. So, okay. So why near happened was because I was kind of uh, focusing just on one segment, which was enterprise adoption of blockchain
Mm-hmm.
prior to near. And I had realized that enterprise is definitely an important piece of the adoption puzzle, but there is this whole world of crypto native projects where we are seeing interesting use cases emerge, and I wanted to broaden my professional horizon to involve those kind of projects also, and near gave that pretty interesting opportunity. Secondly, I am pretty deep in community in this region, and I wanted to leverage that and strengthen that further by directly talking to different community leaders in this geography, maybe cross functionally working with different teams within the organization. So that's why near happened.
Okay.
Power is a very interesting thing. So I met the one of the co-founders earlier this year, like January this year, and I realized the problem that they're trying to solve is a big one. So just to give you an example, right? So today,
Mm-hmm.
if you look at Electric Capital's report, which kind of gives the numbers of
The
developers, active
developers.
developers, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you look at the numbers are like 26,000 monthly active developers, something like that, if I'm not
Mm-hmm.
wrong. So you imagine that after 2016, billions and billions of dollars have been burned. And today we are sitting in 2024, and the number of active developers is minuscule, right? So that's a big problem. Now, when you compare that with the number of developers globally, which is 25 million, more than 25 million, according to some reports, you understand that how early we are in this, and there is definitely something which we need to do differently to bring in more developers to the space. Why are developers important? Because developers are essentially the lifeblood of any tech industry. They come in, they create amazing products, and then they drive businesses within that ecosystem. So what Power is doing differently? So Power is doing differently things differently in a lot of different spheres. Okay, so to bring in more developers, what they have done is the technology is designed such that there is no need of a specific language to be learned by a developer. So a developer who has been developing in C Sharp, Java, they can just use their own languages, the languages that they're most comfortable with, and start building products which can directly be integrated on chain. It is different from other ecosystems because, for example, for Ethereum, you have to learn a smart contract language which is called Solidity. So that language
Yeah.
is for that particular
It's like
platform.
JavaScript.
Exactly. So it's like, so for that specific platform, you have to learn a separate language. So there are different ecosystems. For example, some other ecosystems will have their own scripting language for smart contracts, so on and so forth. So what that does is, first of all, we have a small developer base right now. What these different languages do, they further fragment it. So even lesser developers in different ecosystems. So that's one. And overall developers, they are like working professionals. They have been using a particular language for many years. So there is a resistance to learn new languages just to build in one new ecosystem, right? So that is one of the entry barriers or a friction point that we realized, which was stopping developers to enter the crypto space. So Power solves for that. So now you can use Java, C++ in all the IDs that you are already conversant with. You don't need to learn anything new. And I have seen our co-founder, the tech co-founder Eddie, do this amazing demo where in 15 minutes he can make any developer build products on chain. So which is pretty exciting for me. Having seen, so if you look at different ecosystems, so they have big developer relations team. Why? Because that developer relation team has to drive developers to learn this new language that is needed to build in that ecosystem, right? So it's a big friction in adoption overall for developers. So that is one thing which really attracted me, and I feel that it is one of the key things which will drive the next wave of products on chain.
Okay. So that last idea there, which is kind of the bridge for listeners out there, uh, if people are going to use new technology, they need to be able to use it. Uh, that means, in this case, and I'll put you correct me if I'm wrong, If people are going to use different networks, it could be the Ethereum network, it could be a different network, it's fine. They have to be able to write software, which means they have to be able to write it in the language. You and I are speaking English now. We could speak many other languages between the two of us, but we need a language. And in order to write software, i.e. use network, must be able to write software, hence need, I guess, what Power Labs is doing, which is way in which people can use software. Then people buy things like Ether because that is the fuel you put in the gas tank, which allows you to use Ethereum network distributed database. Now, I know that's a scatter of thoughts, though there is some logic behind it. Is that really what you're thinking about? It's like, how do you facilitate enterprise adoption of these networks? Is that
Okay.
roughly correct?
Yes, it is. It is correct to a certain extent. So let's talk about enterprise adoption, right? So why big
Okay.
enterprises are facing that difficulty in adopting, and then I will connect it to what we are doing at Power and how that will improve chances of enterprises building useful products on
Okay.
chain, right? So today, if I go to an enterprise client, right? So let's say one of the biggest airlines in the world, I go to this client and I tell them that there is this amazing loyalty and rewards use case that you can build on my blockchain, right? So that's
Okay.
the I give the value proposition and I give them all the steps which it will take to implement it. The first problem that airline will face is finding the resources who can build or who can write that
Yep.
that product or that software in the language of my ecosystem. So that's the first hurdle that the enterprise faces. Okay. Secondly, let's say I find some teams in the extended ecosystem to build that. But for an enterprise, that's a uneasy thought because now you are giving control of one critical piece of your application to a third party whom you do not control. That's second. And unless and until I have, as an enterprise, the capacity or the techno or the let's say the engineering capacity to really manage and write that product in the long term, it is never going to be easy for me to really adopt that product because it's something external to me, developed by somebody external. I do not understand it. My engineers don't understand it. So it's a big friction. Not to I have not even mentioned money. The money it takes for these enterprises to find these resources for a
Yes.
long-term engagement like this. So it's a big friction for enterprises. Now imagine a different world where I just go to a enterprise client and I give them the same value proposition and I tell them that all of this can be developed by the engineering team in-house. Like whatever engineering team you already have, they can spare a small capacity to build this. So you build this internally, you own this. There is absolutely no need of external dependence on this. Now the enterprises find it easy because this is something now they understand, right? So if I tell them 10 different languages to learn, they don't understand that. They don't trust in that. But Java, C++, they understand. Their engineers understand. So it's way easier for an enterprise to actually create product to get to that value that I'm showing them in my proposal, right? So that's what we are trying to achieve when it comes to enterprise adoption by removing the entry barrier of developing a product on blockchain, right? So this is what we are doing, especially in context of enterprises.
Okay. And so you've been around since I think you said 2017. I've been
18.
around since, oh God, like 2013 or something. It's been a long time. I distinctly remember sitting in a meeting room in Manhattan, and MIT had put together an enterprise blockchain kind of event. This is 10 years ago. I've been in this too long. At the time, it was like blockchain, not Bitcoin, and as if they're mutually exclusive. Anyway, it has been a long journey, really, for enterprises using distributed databases. But I look to you to give us a little bit of information about the kind of state of the union for enterprise blockchain adoption, because we can see it happening. And there's many ways in which to see it manifest, which are happening right now. But you're closer to the matter. Where do you see enterprise adoption of this technology now? You could contrast it with the past, if you want, that is to say 2017 versus 2024, or just like a snapshot of where things are now in your perspective, view, opinion.
Okay. No, I think that's a really interesting question, and I will give you three time cuts of this. Okay. So 2018, how enterprise world really perceived blockchain. I made a lot of pitches back then, currently, and then what is happening for, let's say, next 5 years. So 2018 or so, enterprises were pretty close to the idea of putting any of their data on public blockchain, just because of the simple fact that they had that hint that some of their data will be in public domain, so they do not understand.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them may not understand the technicalities, that nobody maybe we can architect the system such that nobody was able to really understand the data, but just the idea that some of it may be in public domain made them uncomfortable. So that's one.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of friction at that time. So eventually, how things started moving was, since 2018 to, let's say, cut to 2022, enterprises, they started to realize that, so 2018, a lot of private blockchain implementation started happening. So there was Hyperledger Fabric and all of these private blockchains came in. So they did these kind of use cases like supply chain traceability, so which was essentially distributed ledger, nothing more. So it was not really public blockchain at all. So that started happening in 2018, or maybe even earlier, but I started experiencing that in 2018, 2020.
Mm-hmm.
2022, things started changing. Now enterprises, they were realizing that this is something which is here to stay, and they started to look at the potential, given all the markets that were booming at that time, and the market movements and interesting use cases being built natively in Web3. So they started to understand that this is something which is not just a hype. There are legit use cases which can be brought to enterprises. So now what they started doing was, and we have to understand that enterprises, they are incentivized to uh, to continue existing in a stable state. Okay, so enterprises hate disruption generally, right? So sticking to that.
I have a book for you. 1 second, I'm listening.
Which one? Yeah.
There we go. Book time.
Okay, yeah.
Clayton Christensen's book,
Yes,
Innovator's Dilemma.
yes.
They don't like being disrupted unless they like it. Anyway, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
yeah, no, I think this is an interesting suggestion. I'm going to dig into this weekend. So so they are incentivized to continue in a steady state and grow incrementally, right? So sticking to that theme, what enterprises started doing, the more enterprising ones, they started to do some use cases which are like peripheral use cases, which do not really touch the core of the business, but still give them access to this innovation. So there were a lot of innovation teams that were created in these enterprises. For example, a big entertainment company will have an innovation team, Web3 innovation team. A big consulting company will have a Web3 innovation team. The whole idea of these teams was to identify use cases which are peripheral to the business, which really do not impact the core, but still give them some access. So we saw use cases like NFT drops of some collectibles, some small games that they created using IPs that these companies own, so on and so forth. And maybe some supply chain related use cases also, where they interacted with different organizations in the same industry to bring some efficiencies. So this started happening in 2022, and we saw a lot of such use cases. A lot of governments also opened up. So I did multiple projects with governments in India and in this part of the world. So again, idea was, let's say, documents on chain, traceability on chain, tracing all the beneficiaries of any particular government scheme. So all of those use cases started coming. So basically, these were use cases which I think, like, so we have enterprises had their framework in mind, so they just started to use this new technology on the same framework. So these were so they have products, so they created digital products like NFTs, so on and so forth. So there was no real innovation in that, but still it kind of brought some enterprises up to speed to understand what this technology is all about, and we see some successes also in this. So that was, yeah, please go ahead, sorry.
No, you're fine. I want to kind of almost double click on an idea here, and that is, you've mentioned, like, Well, you've explained clearly that eventually these folks had to kind of learn that distributed database, open source software, so on and so forth, like that has business uses. Now, there has been a trend in this enterprise blockchain thing where, and listeners, you don't know this yet, but anyone who's around me enough will know this. I don't like the term permissioned or private network because the permissions don't have to be written at the protocol level. They can be done at the application level. A. B. Private network. You mean database, right? So, Arpit, you work in this stuff. Can you? Because this actually ends up being the reason why buy Ether. I want to use open network that is permissionless. To use open network, put entries on database, I need Ether, right? That is the investment case for Ether, by the way. Not you, but like people go, oh, why would you want Ether? Well, I remember when it was $2 in Ether, pop, yeah? It's now like 2,500. So don't tell me, don't come and tell me like, oh, I don't know why people use it. Arpit, you're very close to this though. Why would people want to have an open, permissionless, distributed database network that they can access as an enterprise rather than closed database, SQL, NoSQL, whatever you want? Like, what is the logic for a business to do that? I leave it to you because it's obviously happening. It's just taken a while for people to, as you say, kind of adjust, one might say.
Yeah, so I think private and permission networks were kind of a similar thing, right? For instance, there is a framework that I have in my mind. I want to use that framework and still adopt a new technology, right? While actually not adopting it. So created this permission and right. So I don't really call that a blockchain. So public blockchain is a blockchain, right? So now coming to why would an enterprise want to really adopt a public blockchain today? So there are a couple of interesting reasons here. So first of all, today if you look at the industry, so there are a lot of use cases where it is beneficial for a company to cooperate with other players in the industry. So for instance, let's say a simple use case of loyalty and rewards, right? So you have so many stakeholders in that ecosystem. For example, you have airlines, you have different luxury brands, you have
Credit card
maybe
companies.
credit card companies. So there are so many players in that ecosystem. Now, when you have so many players in the ecosystem,
Thanks.
who controls the platform? Right. So ideally, no one should control the platform, and everybody should be able to just interact freely. So all the users of credit card, they should be able to interact freely. People who get loyalty points flying a particular airline, they should be able to access 10 different things, and then there can be a transferability of points from one airline to other airline freely, right? So when you have use cases like this, it doesn't make sense for an enterprise to actually own that platform because this cooperation has to be multi-sided, right? So it can't be I own everything and you come and integrate with me. So it can't happen like that. So that's one use. That's one. So this loyalty rewards, I don't say it just because this is an interesting use case, but just to exemplify what kind of use cases can be there where an enterprise might want to do it.
I'm going to push back on this one. Now, when I lived in Thailand 7 to 8 years ago, I met people who were doing this. They were trying to use distributed database to do loyalty points. They were Dutch people who were trying to do it in Southeast Asia. Now, here's the piece. The reason that people do loyalty points or they're allowed to accrue them is because there's an interchange fee, an intermediary fee when one uses card and payment network, right? And then some of it is reimbursed. Now, you can do it via distributed database, right? But how does the business model work then? Because in this kind of more idealized world, you've extracted the middle men or women, the intermediaries, they're out. You're not charging an interchange fee. And so the loyalty point, like where does the yield come from is essentially the question. Like, explain that a little bit because what this technology can do is remove intermediaries who extract rents and they give some of the rents back to people in terms of loyalty points usually. How does that work? And you would know better than I do, though I think from the knowledge I have, that's accurate.
No, I think that's a good read about how current loyalty programs are
Okay.
structured globally, right? So that's right. And one of the reasons why blockchain-based loyalty points have not taken off yet is this is one of the reasons, right? Probably we have not cracked the business case yet, how to actually do that in a way which makes sense business-wise, right? But if you look at just a small subset of that whole piece, so loyalty
Okay.
points accrued by one airline, and if I just make these loyalty points interchangeable or transferable across different airlines, that itself, it doesn't cut out the intermediary. Like your credit cards are still, let's say, the intermediaries, but still the user gets a flexibility in terms of where they want to use their points. And there can be even
companies hate that. Like, they don't want their loyalty points trading on an open market, because then you find out which ones are worth something and which ones aren't. They actually prefer to trap people. So let's you and I do a little thought experiment on the fly here. What does a better business model look like in that instance? One way to do it might be that they're tradable against goods and services being provided. You could say airlines. I already have one of those. The lovely British Airways, they're always late. But that already exists. It doesn't require a distributed database. Another way to look at it is the way people use them at supermarket, grocery store, chain. Again, don't need distributed database. What is a better business model then? That means loyalty points. Why would you need that, or why couldn't it be done in centralized form? Because that really comes to the why use distributed ledger question and answer, and I'm interested in your thoughts about it.
So I think, Benjamin, when we think about pretty much any system in terms of why it can't be done in centralized way, I think pretty much everything which is being done today can be done in a centralized way, in way more efficient manner that it can be
Except
done
Bitcoin.
in a decentralized. Except Bitcoin, let's say, for that specific, or maybe these peer-to-peer payment protocols. Except that, pretty much all the applications that we are seeing, they can be done in centralized fashion, also with a lot better user experience. But the principles or the fundamental behind public blockchain is that the user at the end owns those points or owns those rewards or whatever the form of digital asset you produce, and eventually in an ideal world they have all the flexibility to spend them. So now, you earlier made the point that companies hate to have their reward points maybe listed on a open marketplace. I agree to that, because eventually that they may gain a lot of value, they may lose a lot of value, but so that's a way of looking at it, right? For example, one airline A and another airline B, which are competitors. So this case is true for these competitors. But if I tell you that A has an ecosystem around it, for example, let's say British Airways has a extensive ecosystem of partners around them. For example, a lot of merchandise companies, a lot of let's say grocery stores, and all of these, where those reward points can be freely used. So today also it happens, right? For example, I have my points, and there are these closed marketplaces where I can get access to the deals, but that's very limited experience right now, and very limited to a small subset. And then there can be multiple and honestly, I don't have an answer to what kind of a business model can evolve, because I'm not an expert in this loyalty and reward points. But I feel that technology enables us to create such systems, and business model breakthrough will happen eventually.
I don't understand why a distributed database makes that kind of system better, and I don't understand what business model would supplant the existing business model. I don't. I'm asking the questions, but
yeah, no,
I've seen this happening for 10 years. I just don't understand. That's maybe my ignorance, but why distributed database for points, loyalty points, right? Like, it's totally different to Bitcoin. But maybe somebody comes up with an answer. I'll leave it to them. We are coming up on time, though.
In fact, one very very common, one thing that I always believe is that we have had a technology breakthrough in terms of Bitcoin,
Okay.
right? But that technology breakthrough has happened, and we are creating multiple use cases, trying to create a lot of business models around that. But that business model breakthrough is yet to come. That is what I believe, because the moment the business model breakthrough comes, then we will see mass adoption automatically, right? So enterprises will start seeing monetary value in it and creating products. So that business model that you are looking for, pretty much everybody is searching for that business model right now. So right now, what we are doing is supplanting our frameworks that we already have and trying to kind of improvise upon them. But I feel that true business model breakthrough is yet to happen in this space.
That's fine. Fine. We're coming up on time, so we finish episodes by thinking about the future. You obviously think a lot about the future, given your role. Are there any kind of things that you've got your eye on at the moment in the space, or anything that you think is particularly interesting as the space evolves?
So I feel three things. So first is RWA tokenization. So
Yes.
I feel that space will evolve slowly given the industry that it is being built on, which is like very conservative by its nature. But I feel it's a big moment in the finance world. So I'm keenly following RWA space. Second space is definitely decentralized AI. So we are seeing a lot of action with a lot of centralized AI models out there, but we have started to see some activity and at least some thought on the lines of decentralized AI and how that will look like in next 5 years.
All right. So hold on a second. Decentralized AI. I keep hearing that. Now,
Yes.
what do you mean by that? Because I was mentored by AI researchers from the 1980s. This is 20 years ago. Yeah.
Okay.
And what decentralized AI? So just explain a little bit for the listeners what that might mean, and let's see where we land.
So if you look at AI models, right? So there are different stakeholders in this. So there is somebody who creates a model, then there are people or there are sources from which data is gathered for training that particular model. Then there are users of that model, right? And then a lot of intermediaries who can aggregate a lot of these models, provide a front end for people to come and interact with them. So right now, if you also let's say we have a centralized system where a company controls that model, they control the data it was trained on, and then the explainability of that model is kind of limited to the external world, right? So it's very similar to the centralized tech companies that we have today, right? So which is like pretty. So it works for people. Most of the people will not even find it troublesome to use those systems, but at the end of the day, it's kind of opaque to the external world, the details of that, right? Now compare it to please go ahead.
Is it about access? So the most important piece is the training data, of course, then goes into model, as you say, right? And it's about transparency of training data, where training data comes from, garbage in, garbage out problem, and then what the model is doing in order to convert inputs into outputs, right? Which part of that needs to be decentralized or could be, in your opinion? And we're going down like a rabbit hole here, but that's sometimes we like to do that on this show. So
yeah, no, for sure. So I think the part where what data is coming in, so that part is pretty important, because at the end of the day, the data which is being sourced to train a model is data which is owned by some third parties, right? So it can be my data, it can be your data, it can be some other centralized company's data, right? So that trace of where data is coming from, that is very important, because at the end of the day, it has implications on my rights as an individual also, right? For example, if my shopping data is being used without me knowing that it is being used to train a data, then I should at least be knowing that it is happening or maybe rewarded eventually, right? So that piece is interesting. And I feel that piece will have to be decentralized, and it is kind of a good case for decentralization. For example, if you look at some of the applications, like for example, Brave browser, they did the BAT token, right? For example, if I share some of my information, and then there are a lot of use cases in medical research where if the subject shares some of their information, they get rewarded or incentivized, and at the same time, the researcher gets all the data that they want. So it's a fair exchange of value, right? So that one piece is important to be decentralized at least from where I stand. Secondly, I feel that eventually the models, so there will be some bigger models which will have pretty much all the users sticking. For example, OpenAI right now, so ChatGPT, pretty much everybody's talking about ChatGPT. But I feel a lot of indie action will also happen in this space. There will be small independent researchers who will create a lot of interesting models in the future. So just to ensure that they find a level playing field, at least maybe with a smaller audience which looks up to these decentralized marketplaces. That's another idea which seems interesting.
All right, nice one. So we are on time, which is good. Arpit, it's been really nice to have you here today. Thank you for a stimulating discussion. It's always nice to share ideas and information with folks because there's a lot of noise out there.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Benjamin, for having me.
There you have it, folks. Arpit Sharma, COO at PWR Labs. I hope you enjoyed the episode. US listeners, Wisdom Tree Prime, check it out. Apple, Android app stores, Bird app, at Benjamin Dean. I'm on it too much, but you can always find me there. It's been really nice having you here. I always enjoy having you folks on this podcast. I'll see you again next time.